All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name here is Joseph Banks, Assistant Director for Career Services and the Dedicated Career Design Specialist for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. I just want to start off here by thanking everyone who's here today, as well as any future listeners that are watching this on YouTube. Our Digital Takeout series is a great opportunity to hear from our USU alums, talk about their experience, discuss opportunities that await many of our CHaSS students. So before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that they can feel free to submit questions to the speakers during the presentation, and that we have Sarah monitoring those to ask after the first part of the discussion. So now I'm just going to turn the time over to Andrea to introduce our guests for today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joe. We have two guests today, and I'm going to start with the first one alphabetically. Srinidi Carling, who holds a BA in Spanish and Global Communications from Utah State University, joined IFIT immediately after graduating this spring. In her role as Latin American Operations Coordinator, Srinidi works with clients in Central and South America and manufacturers in Asia to coordinate and plan the movement of containers of fitness equipment, allowing her to utilize the language and communication skills she honed during her time at USU. Srinidi remains committed to understanding and learning from the diverse peoples and cultures of the world. And our other panelist today is Jordan Davis, who holds bachelor's degrees in Asian Studies and International Business from Utah State University and is currently the senior manager for Adobe. He began studying Japanese in high school before serving a mission in southern Japan. Since then, his love of language and pursuit of entrepreneurial experiences has seen him work for Toyota and serve Japanese clients for his current employer, Adobe. He credits his communication skills for helping him bridge the gap between technical and business folks working in these industries. And Jordan is an active traveler who continues to add language skills, most recently Spanish and Portuguese, to his repertoire. So Jordan and Srinidi, thank you so much for being with us here today. We're so excited to hear a bit more about your experiences. And I'm going to start by asking each of you to tell us a little bit about your history and how you came to your position. And in support of hearing more about your career path and what you like about your jobs, how you keep up to date with the industry, we are going to let each of you go through a short slide deck. And Srinidi, we're going to start with you. So I'll let you share your slides, and we'll start by hearing a bit about your background, and then we'll turn the time over to Jordan and hear a bit about his.
Thanks, Andrea. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everyone see it? Awesome. Okay, so my name is Srinidi Carling, as Andrea said. I work for IFIT Health and Fitness as their Latin America Operations Coordinator. So first question was about how I got here. I studied Spanish and Global Communication, as Andrea said, at USU, and I just barely graduated. And as I graduated, I honestly was not super sure where I was going to end up going. I had a variety of experience in the workforce working with students that were learning English. So they had experience from other countries. Most of my students were Spanish speaking, but I had students that were from, Korea, from Italy, from all over the world, from Russia. And so that was such a cool opportunity to be able to work with people that had cultures and linguistic capabilities that were different than mine. And I loved having that. And so that was something I wanted to continue. I knew that as I went into the workforce. So as I was looking around for what I wanted to do, I explored a variety of different career options and honestly wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. So I just started applying for things. And I actually ended up getting an email from the advising office about the position that I now hold. And so I applied for it thinking, who knows, maybe this could be something that's really cool. And when I came in for my interview, or I guess a little bit before, I found out that I had connections with the team that I'm now working on, people that I knew from high school that were in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So it was super cool to use those connections that I had made, which I'm learning more and more that it's vital to have those connections. And it obviously helped me to land a job that I now am loving and love working on this team. So definitely take the opportunities that come your way, because even if especially if you aren't sure exactly where you want to go, just jump on all the opportunities and hopefully something will work out and you'll love it. So a little bit about what I love about this position that I have right now. Off to the left, you'll see this picture is the Mexico team that I get to work with on a daily basis. We have a variety of salesmen and operations people that work on our team in an office in Mexico City, and I recently got to travel down there and be a part of that. So working with my coworkers, both here in the office and in my team down in Mexico, I've learned a lot from them, but as well from customers. I get to work with customers that are from all over Latin America. I love being able to interact with all of those individuals, as well as I'm learning a lot from interacting with factories and other people that work for iFit in China. And so I don't speak Chinese, I don't speak Mandarin, I don't speak Cantonese, but I'm learning a lot from those individuals and those communications that I have with them. I love that each day is unique and offers new opportunities. I originally thought that when I was coming to work that it was going to be pretty monotonous and similar each day, but that is not the case at all. Every day is very different, especially right now with the current world situation with shipping and logistics. It's chaos for those of you that don't know. So it's very unique to come to work every day and try to solve problems. There's always something to be learned. And then, like I said, with all of those problems that are going on, there's lots of creativity to be had in trying to solve the problems that occur on a daily basis, trying to ship containers to Central and South America. So those are some things that I love about my job. My answer, I think, about how I keep up to date with the industry is going to be a little bit different than Jordan's, but I'm still in the process of learning my industry. I heard a lot when I was a student at USU that, if you have the communication skills that the people that your employers want, then a lot of times they'll be willing to teach you the skills that they need you to know. And that has definitely been true for this position. I had no clue what I was doing in the operations world before I started this position 5 months ago. But I am getting the hang of things, and I feel like I'm starting to really understand a lot about the operations world. And so I'm still working on keeping up to date with my industry. But a big part of that is just knowing what's going on in the world. What's going on in China and how that is affecting everything else. So, and lastly, what made me pursue this line of work, a huge part of it was my desire to utilize my language skills. That was something that was huge. It's just a huge part of my life. I feel like it's a huge part of my identity, and I love being able to utilize those language skills and to increase them. And so being able to do that was something that was really important to me. Just working with people that are across different boundaries has been super important. So I've loved being able to meet people from across the world, whether it be digitally or actually in person, and learning a lot of things about myself as I do all of those things. So.
Thank you so much, Srinidi. And Jordan, we will turn the time over to learn a bit about your experience.
There we go. Found the unmute, and we'll share this. So thank you. Good to learn a little bit more about Srinidi and see other USU alums' path post-graduation. So I graduated a little bit ago in 2008 from Utah State. But my theme in the slide deck today is boomeranging. So for one reason or the other, things seem to come back to me in my life. And just a quick example of that from my early education is my first grade teacher was also my fifth grade teacher, and my second grade teacher was also my fourth grade teacher. And so you'll see that pattern continuing. So I studied some Japanese in high school and then continued that at Utah State, and started out a little bit more with a tech focus in my degree. Initially, I was focused on management information systems before I stepped away after my freshman year and spent 2 years in southern Japan, mostly in Okinawa. And so I learned not only Japanese, but got a small taste for one of the endangered languages of the world, or I guess there's multiple dialects in Okinawan, but got a taste for Okinawan as well. But then returned after to Utah State for another year and continued studying Japanese, had a Japanese literature course, and was eager to get back to Japan, pursued, met with the study abroad office and saw there was a couple different sister universities that Utah State had in Japan. And I wanted to experience Japan in a different light. When I was a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I didn't have as much an opportunity to experience karaoke or live music or go out into the ocean and certain things that weren't available. And I also wanted to see other parts of Japan. And so I went back as a university student for my junior year, spent my full year in Yokohama, just about a half hour south of Tokyo, and was a very different university experience than Utah State. What was nice is I could still continue to pay tuition, and any scholarships that I had could apply to my tuition at Utah State. So it made it very much easier to coordinate. And while I was there, there was a wave of students from all over the world that came. So I had classmates from Morocco and from Madagascar and from France and from a lot of different countries that were studying with me. We had some English language courses, and I studied some higher level Japanese courses. But then, especially the second semester, and a semester is about almost a full 6-month block, so it's a little bit different structure. But I was able to take business courses taught in Japanese, international business courses, where sitting there and professors teaching in Japanese, of course, and he's got maybe 2 Chinese students and 3 Korean students, and all the rest are Japanese. And he says, here's how it's done in Japan, here's how it's done in Korea, here's how it's done in China. And then he's saying, for the whole rest of the world, Jordan, can you please stand up and say how it's done in Australia? And I'm from a tiny town in Utah. I can't really speak for all of Europe and everything else, but yeah, really neat experience. And I also, at the same time as taking those courses in Japanese, business courses, I also was able to study Korean and Chinese at the same time, neither of which would I have done at Utah State. I think it was almost a blessing that before I left that I wasn't able to map all my credits to direct credit for my degree at the time, because that sort of was freeing in a sense. I was like, okay, well, I might not get credit for much that will directly map my degree. I'll come back and do 2 more years at Utah State. So I took what I was interested in. I never otherwise would have taken those language courses, but I was able to travel over to Korea, later on over to China, mostly on my own, and have enough skills to navigate confidently. And keep in mind, this was pre-smartphone, so quite a different experience when you don't have any navigation or language translation skills in your pocket. But from there, I returned back to Utah State, which became my senior year, because I met with many different deans of many different colleges saying, how does this Rethinking the Atomic Bombings course cover this particular credit, right? This science or this history credit. And due to a lot of diligence, I think I may have spent more time for that first semester back in dean's offices and coordinating meetings to get those credits to align appropriately, and writing up, additional like 1-page summaries, et cetera, around those. But it definitely paid off such that I was able to actually graduate at the end of that year. But I wasn't quite ready. I didn't have a career lined up. I didn't expect that was happening. I thought I'd have another year. But during that last year, me and a roommate of mine, we set up the karaoke concert series where we took the karaoke box idea. We go with our professors and other students to the karaoke box in Japan and sing in Japanese and other languages, after class. We brought that to the house concert idea that happens often in Logan, at least it did at the time. And we would do, anybody from campus or otherwise could come and play the song, and everybody would sing along. We borrowed a projector from the fine arts building and put all the words up on the wall, and everybody would sing along, and the song would come alive. But a lot of international connections spun out of that as well. But I graduated. I realized I needed a job. So I interviewed for a company in LA for an international travel company, bringing tourists over from Japan. But that wasn't quite the right fit, and then found a good fit with Toyota using my Japanese skills. So I moved out to Kentucky and then to Alabama. And for the Tundra and Tacoma engine line, I sourced parts mainly from Japan for that line. But that's where I sort of found the niche for my career, which is being able to communicate well, as language enables you to do, but not just from a language standpoint, but being able to understand the technical world that the engineers were dealing with on the engine line, and communicate that back to the business folks, and get the right quotes for the right products, and dealing with the just-in-time nature of the production system that Toyota runs so well. But then there's a chance to come back to Utah. I joined a startup back in the tech space, but I was in a similar role where I could sort of communicate with the technical engineers, right, the developers, and translate that to the end users, the customers, and manage a lot of different accounts and lead a lot of the sales. But then financial crisis hit, a lot of the funding for that dried up, and I was able to get into Adobe. And this is where my Japanese really was critical. I actually interviewed in the Tokyo office. I was working on a concept at the time to open smoothie shops in Japan, and had won a trip over to Japan to explore that idea. So they were able to coordinate for me to interview. So sitting down across from 4 different managers, doing the interview all in Japanese was definitely intimidating, but that got my foot in the door. So I did Japanese support for a while, and then I boomeranged, as if you've caught the theme here. I went back to that startup. They got funding, was able to go and help them grow it. When I left after a couple years back there, was sort of running the business as the COO, while the CEO was primarily doing fundraising and other operations. So got to grow a team, and being able to communicate well and see the larger picture, and communicate with different groups, be it finance or the developers, et cetera, the potential investors, continue to play a key part in how I operated there. But then they were going through a change there, and Adobe recruited me back. Was able to rejoin Adobe, and I for about a year, there was a manager in Japan for a key department that my group worked with. I was managing a group in the US that did something similar. That manager left Adobe, and they had a vacancy for this position. So I would log in the evenings and do a weekly meeting with this team to coordinate all their stuff that they had dependencies on the US for. So I continued to use it. I was wondering if I was actually going to take over that job and move to Tokyo. That didn't end up happening. But I won't get into all of these here. This is just some interesting, each one of these has some sort of a story behind it, from being in a town in the middle of China, speaking with other Chinese folks, but only in Japanese because my Chinese wasn't strong enough, in different contexts there, to the rice and pepper fields in South Korea, different experiences there. But just, I think a key here is that, for me, a takeaway is that a small effort really goes a long way. And if you'll learn a phrase or two, or invest a little bit of time, you'll be surprised how quickly you can put that to use, and how quickly that will allow you just to connect in a very natural way, whether it be professional, personal, with people that are right in your neighborhood, or people across the world. So I won't get into all these right now in the interest of time, but just some high-level observations from my career, and from a language standpoint as well, that I just say curiosity will lead to more understanding. That understanding will just really naturally lead to more empathy. And there's not an overabundance of empathy. I'd say the more empathy that you can develop, whether you're using language or otherwise, that's going to be a critical key to be successful in a career. But I won't go through all these right now. You can read through them. But I think the last thing that I'll end with here is that, I don't think anybody's focused on just learning a single language, right? And learning that language isn't necessarily the end goal. It's using that language to connect with people and to accomplish other tasks, though it's fun in and of itself. And if you're creative, there's unlimited ways that you can really just immerse yourself right here in Utah in all these different languages. So some of the things that I do right now, I'm really doubling down on learning Portuguese. So this morning, driving back from the Adobe office, I had a CD playing that I picked up at the local library. Just practicing different phrases. And when I go to sleep at night, I do my sleep meditations. It's in Portuguese. And so I like to pretend that my mind is learning it, but just the speech patterns and other things really start to stick and become much more natural. And you find these ways to immerse yourself even regardless of where you're at in the world. So with that, I'll end there and we'll go to the next questions. Thanks.
All right, thanks both Srinidi and Jordan. The next question I had was more about like what started your interest in learning languages, in learning a foreign language, especially, you know, when you were younger, as well as even right now, as you continue to choose what next language to study. You know, what started that interest, and how has knowing one or more languages advanced you in your career? And then Srinidi, do you mind if I ask you first?
Yeah, for sure. So definitely for me, as I've reflected about how I became interested in languages, it was definitely from a very, very young age. I remember just like walking through grocery stores, even hearing people that were speaking in other languages and just being fascinated by the fact that they understood one another, because I had no idea what they were saying. And so as I started learning Spanish in high school, when I would be in different places, I would hear people speaking, or I would say things to people, even if they didn't speak Spanish, and think, how is it that they don't understand me? Like, this makes perfect sense. And so it started to broaden my perspective that languages really are truly incredible. And so I wanted to deepen my understanding of Spanish so that I could really fully communicate with people. Yeah, so that's definitely how it got started for me.
Yeah, and for me, you might not be able to tell, but I'm actually half New Mexican. So what that means, though, from a language standpoint is, my mom speaks standard Spanish, just by virtue of growing up in Albuquerque and her surroundings. And my father actually speaks Navajo. So every summer we'd drive to the Navajo Indian Reservation and we'd listen to the radio in Navajo, and then we'd end up in Albuquerque, where all the street signs and store signs and menus are probably more in Spanish than in English. And so I didn't realize it until just going through this exercise or preparing for this, but I see now that that's just sort of opened up my world a little bit more. And then I had a half Japanese friend in middle school, and we were looking to our classes in high school. And I remember sitting there in middle school signing up for, let's take Japanese, because we're one of, I think, 2 high schools at the time in Utah that had a Japanese class. And from there, just continued to build on that.
That's wonderful. We do love, thinking about where that interest starts and what gets us going. I think many of us started in foreign language through, as you point out, connections that maybe seem random at the time, but really do go on to have a great impact. We'd also like to know how knowing a foreign language has, enhanced your overall communication skills. I mean, you've both started to touch on this in your presentations about your professional work, but how do you feel that your communication skills as a whole have been enhanced, as well as how has knowing a foreign language increased your competency as far as cultural competency, whether that be in your professional or personal life? And Jordan, this time we can start with you.
Okay, very good. So yeah, I hit on a little bit, I think, just allowing me to relate to people right out of the gate, beyond just the, a phrase in their language or some sort of some cultural experience that might help me have a starting point to a conversation, but really just allowing me to put myself in their shoes. The more you understand a language, you realize that that is sort of the framework for seeing the world, how you categorize things, how your food experience in that piece of culture. And so just connecting with people right out of the gate. But it doesn't mean you have to know their language to be able to benefit from those communication skills, right? Just right out of the gate, being curious about them, being open, and asking questions. And I think volunteering parts of yourself allows them to be more comfortable to connect with, like I said, in professional and personal setting. One thing I'll add is that I just at Adobe, we're the group that I'm over. So I manage some of the technical support teams, like I said, in between the customer, we're the front line of the customer, and then we speak with the back-end engineering teams developing the product and the product team. So we are that bridge from a communication standpoint. And I just this week on Tuesday got the final offer from a hire that I'm bringing over from India, going to move over to Utah. And that's the I just more than tripled the size of my team. So I've been hiring like mad, and many of the people that I'm hiring, I have people that directly report to me up in the Canada office, which is right across the street from Quebec. And I've stayed in Quebec when I go up there for work, so I have to navigate things in French, etc. I know how to say root beer in French, so that's really helpful. But a lot of people that I'm hiring have different backgrounds, right? So one of my new hires in San Jose, he grew up in Hong Kong, right? And connected another hire, grew up in Egypt, and a lot of different hires from all over the world. And sometimes they're in that same place, sometimes they're in different places. But just to be able to build confidence, build trust with them right out of the gate of someone that I get them to the extent that I can, and I want to learn more about them and support them in their career, makes it much more natural.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Jordan said. The more people feel like you care about who they are, and particularly, you know, things about their language, their culture, the easier it will be to connect. I didn't mention this earlier, but I served a mission in Miami, and that is a melting pot. So there were lots and lots of different peoples from all over the world with all different linguistic backgrounds that I was able to meet. And when I did know, as Jordan said, like little phrases in their languages, it's amazing how fast you can connect with someone that way. So that's definitely true. I also loved what Jordan said in his presentation about the empathy that comes from being curious and from trying to find those connections with people. It really is true that if you are seeking to try to understand someone, you gain a greater empathy for them. And I feel like in doing so, you know, all those connections allow you to become more culturally competent, to become to enhance your communication skills, because you're able to amplify that portfolio that you have, amplify that that understanding of the world from people that are different from you. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Great. So let's see, my next question I have, so you both are working for basically, you know, tech-based companies or organizations here. How do you see your language ability and even your strong communication skills helping in that industry? And then Srinidi, do you mind?
Yeah. Yes, iFit is becoming ever more tech-based. For those of you that don't know, iFit is a treadmill, elliptical. It's a fitness company that produces exercise equipment. But along with that, there are features and a program application called iFit that goes with these. And so it allows our clients to be able to go all over the world with iFit trainers via their screen on their device, to be able to see, you know, those places, but also to be able to learn about them with the trainer. And then those, even the, what's this called? Hang on. Like the inclination of the geography changes on the treadmill to be able to follow along with that trainer. So yes, very, very tech-based. And as far as my language skills coming into that, I think because we are based in China, well, at least a lot of them our manufacturing is, my communication skills have come in handy and are really necessary. I'm learning a lot about the ways that I need to communicate with those individuals that I work with in China to be able to make sure that things make sense to them, because the way that I might communicate something in English is not necessarily something that's going to make a lot of sense to them because of their language backgrounds, because of their cultural backgrounds. And so just making sure that those communication skills kind of line up so that everyone is on the same page, everything makes sense to everyone, because a lot of our stuff goes between China to me and then down to Central and South America, Spanish speaking. So there's lots of transitions between languages. And so it's so important to make sure that everything is well understood all along the way. So.
Yeah, I think that we could probably spend the whole times talking about this topic, but I think at a high level, we both hit on some of the key pieces, just not just engineers and the business folk, but just any conversation. And I think, honestly, if we talk about, most of my communication for Adobe, we're, aside from Japan, most every other market does their primary business and our employees communicate primarily in English. And that's pretty common for most multinational corporations today. So it almost lends itself to making some of us in a US speaking, primarily, English speaking country like the US, it could lead us to be a little bit lazy or complacent. But one thing that studying Japanese and other languages and studying music and studying some programming has done for me, and I come back to like try to do some songwriting or poetry in English, is you get a renewed appreciation for your own language, a renewed understanding. You start to think about really the underlying meaning of a word and why you might want to change the word or the structure of a sentence. I think that pays big dividends, even just, even though my day-to-day, most of what I'm doing on Slack and email and via Zoom meetings is all English. I think I'm much more careful with my wording, much more aware, and especially when I'm involved in like the naming of products, like just involved in naming an internal tool, right? Trying to think of things that would not only carry a clear meaning in English, but that might be able to make sense to the broader groups that might be using it across the globe.
Thank you for touching on that, Jordan. I think it's really important for students listening to hear that even if on the surface of things, a job might not appear to need foreign language skills because we are working perhaps in an industry that is dominated by English speakers, there are still so many ways in which foreign language can hone our craft even as English speakers. I do want to conclude with the final question before we move to Q&A. And I will on that point just remind our listeners today that if you have questions for Jordan and Srinidi, we've been seeing some of those come in either through the chat or through the Q&A feature, but please keep those coming because we'll be turning to those shortly. But I do want to ask this final question from our point, which is, what advice would each of you give to students who do have foreign language or culture training, how they can go about marketing themselves as they are graduating from USU and looking to organizations? And again, you may want to broaden that to, especially how can language skills be applicable to jobs even where maybe language skills are not a required part of the job description? And Jordan, I'll start with you.
Okay, yeah, the first thing that jumps out at me for this one is volunteering. If you know a language well enough to do some form of translation or interpretation for organizations, that will keep it fresh for you. And when you go into a job interview and you're able to touch on that, there's not many things that can show that you are keeping it fresh, that you care about, the communities you might be serving, et cetera, than volunteering in some way. And I know that's one of, I'm thinking back to my very first Adobe interview back when they're in Orem, right after Omniture was acquired. And I think there's two things that that the hiring managers, two of them in the room, were asking me about. They were very curious about the karaoke concert series that we did up at Utah State that since sort of become the first iteration of the guitar club up there that I just think is still in operation in one form or the other. But then they were also very interested in my volunteers stuff that I was doing at the time, using Japanese, and that just made it really natural. And I said, okay, yeah, let's have you meet with the team in Tokyo. I could go on.
Yeah.
Srinidi, why don't you share some thoughts there?
Okay, I have to agree. I definitely think that doing anything and everything that you can to continue to utilize those language skills. I know that I've had lots of opportunities, whether it be a lot of them since COVID have been virtually. I had the opportunity to work with Seed I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but with the business building, with Seed, to be able to teach small business skills to entrepreneurs in third world countries. And so I was working with individuals from the Dominican Republic. And so that was something I didn't have to leave my house to be able to communicate with those individuals and to continue to volunteer, and also to utilize those language skills that I was working on and still am working on. So there's always ways that you can look for. So I mean, the university has tons of ways that you can continue to work on your language skills. So just utilizing all of the opportunities that you have to keep developing those.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Sarah Smith, by the way. I'm the events intern at CHaSS, and I am a journalism and PR major, but I'm doing a Bachelor's of Arts in Spanish. So this has been really applicable and helpful to me too. So thank you so much for everything that you've shared. We're going to get into the questions from the Q&A panel. And the first one says, I grew up on the Navajo reservation as well. How do you find the time, especially with the significant other, kids, volunteer associations, etc., to learn or improve an extra language?
I'll share some thoughts maybe right out of the gate. So I think I hit on a couple of bullets in terms of ways to immerse yourself, but maybe I'll just dive a little bit deeper into some of those areas, right? So I hit on some of the key activities that we basically all do every day, right? We sleep, or we go to sleep, right? And so that winding down with that sleep meditation. So Insight Timer is the app that I called out, but I've used that in studying Chinese. So even right now I have Chinese, Spanish, Japanese, and English are the ones that are configured right now. And so when I open it up, I can just randomly go to any one of those, but I'm focused on Portuguese right now. So I'll just, right before I go to sleep, I'll turn that on. And oftentimes I'll fall asleep before the 10 or 15-minute session has ended. But that's been really good because, like I said, speech pattern, I'm not necessarily worried about vocabulary piece by piece at that point. It's just the flow of things. And you think about a newborn learning language, right? They're absorbing speech patterns, I think, even when they're in the mother's womb, right? And then they come out, and that's really what they're learning right out of the gate. Another is, like, for me, is my daughters are in Chinese immersion. So Utah is one of the states leading the way in terms of immersion programs. I actually went up to Portland and toured a Chinese or Japanese elementary, because there's no Japanese immersion program in Utah right now. I was considering moving up to Portland for a few reasons, but for now they're learning Chinese. So especially during the pandemic, when all their homework is, half of their school, like their math and their science is in Chinese, me with my basic understanding of Chinese was very, very helpful. But having them learn it continues to give me opportunities. I just got sitting here as like my daughter's homework in Chinese, right? One in 3rd grade, one in 5th grade. And we're starting more and more at home to communicate a little bit in Chinese. And music is a phenomenal way, music and dance, as you're just driving the car, listening to music or whatever else. And then using the library, right? Not only can you get books and CDs, but a lot of those actually have an app as well. So I have the Mango Languages app with multiple languages on my phone. There's no cost to me. Normally these things are like $30 a month or more. But if you just have a library card, you can tap into that and use it on an ongoing basis. And so, and you're sitting there standing in line, instead of pulling up a Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or whatever it is these days, you can just go in and do a quick 5-minute lesson, reminder, some flashcards. That's really actually quite fun.
So this one isn't quite as relevant to me because I, unlike Jordan, have not started learning more languages. I would like to. He's motivating all of us to learn more languages. But I definitely agree with those ways of, in your daily life, using music. If you can surround yourself with people that speak those languages, to be able to use that, make contacts with people that are in countries that speak those languages, so that you can, even just sending text messages back and forth in those languages are good ways to practice or to create new language skills. So
I have to add just one last thing I'll add onto this question, though, is so one of the little experiences that I had on my slide deck was Star Wars in Navajo. So it was the first feature film that they dubbed just a few years back. I was working at Spingo at the time, which is an event agent. So working with City Weekly, we got the Eastern States to tour that feature film. For the first time, one was dubbed in Navajo. So they're displaying at the Natural History Museum here in Utah. So since my dad speaks Navajo, we went, and I think we're probably the only two white folks in the audience. They had some technical difficulties with the issue, but I think the film and I think Star Wars, the very first one, A New Hope, and Finding Nemo are both available on Disney Plus, dubbed in Navajo, if you want to take a look at those. But yeah, sorry, since I'm off mute, I'll say that one last thing is that anytime I turn on the TV today, if I do watch a series on Netflix or whatever, like I watched, was it Squid Game? It's originally in Korean, if you have the ability to watch it. My French friend refuses to watch it because he can't get the Korean audio here and he'll only watch stuff in his native tongue. But I watched it in Portuguese. And then I might turn on like English subtitles. But you can do that anytime I turn on TV now. I have some sort of combination there where Portuguese is either the audio or the subtitle. I did that with Spanish for a while. And once again, my brain, it's a lot of it's subconscious, but I'll see where's, oh yeah. And it will just be a reminder or a reinforcer for vocab and speech patterns. And a word that literally might translate as one thing that they'll use in different languages, they'll use differently than we would. It's not, literal translation oftentimes isn't relevant.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Our next question says, for me, learning Spanish, I feel anxious when I speak Spanish and I realize I don't know what to say or I don't understand. How did you overcome the language anxiety?
Ooh, I can speak to this one. It is real for everyone. You just have to practice, because that anxiety won't just go away without it. I definitely still have moments where I'm like, I'm not really sure what exactly that person said. And you know what? You realize that when someone is learning English, you expect them to ask questions, to ask for clarifications, and that's okay to do. So remember that when you're trying to learn a new language, that you're practicing, but you also need to ask questions and ask for clarification so that you can continue to progress. So
yeah, finding a buddy is huge. Some sort of a mentor. I did in Japan when I was learning Korean and Chinese. I did language exchanges with fellow international students who were trying to learn English, and I did it with like a flight attendant as well, where I would sit down and we would just sort of do the cover the same ground, right? So they're not paying a tutor, I'm not paying for a tutor. We're just both benefiting from that mutual interest in doing it in trade is really helpful. But I think if you can find someone that you can, and texting is great. If you haven't used WhatsApp, as soon as you step outside of the US, WhatsApp is massive, or similar platforms where it's not only texting back and forth, but you can easily send audio or video. But I've also been doing for Portuguese, it's called Preply, but there's a lot of different ones where you can find very inexpensive for an hour session at a time with a native speaker tutor. You just do it virtually, you schedule it at your own pace, and you buy 10 lessons and get 1 or 2 free as well. So it's pretty inexpensive to do that if you're committed to a language as well. And usually you want to be studying on your own, and then you get more out of that in-person session if you want to speak with a native speaker and have that interaction. It sort of forces you. My tutor right now, she's native to Brazil, but she's been living in Japan, so she didn't know any Japanese, so I've been helping her a little bit there. But she just relocated to Dubai, but I just continue to just schedule at a time, so her availability windows changed. So I woke up last week at I think 5:30 and did an hour session before I went and exercised and started my day. So there's quite a few options if you're really committed.
Awesome. Another question that just came in says, I just graduated with a minor in Japanese, but COVID sort of took the legs out of my final semesters when a lot of my conversational practice was supposed to take place. How do you suggest finding a way to practice speaking skills the way things are right now? I'm assuming with less ability to meet people and talk in person.
It's a good one. I think if you have different forums online to meet someone, and you could do that similar type thing I did with the language exchange, we just usually go to a restaurant in Japan near the university and would do those and grab a meal at the same time. But meeting someone initially, wherever the best forum is, whether it's a formal job posting, but I've connected with people just on Twitter. I don't know if that's the most natural place these days, but I think putting it out there and just trying to reach out to whether it's a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group or a university forum or post probably where I try to sit and learning your native tongue and swapping.
I like that. Yeah, I think it just comes back to using your connections, finding ways to connect with people that speak the languages that you're trying to learn. And oftentimes, yeah, they are trying to learn maybe a language that you already speak. And so you can help each other. I definitely have several friends who are native Spanish speakers that are trying to learn English. And so oftentimes I'll text them in Spanish because I want to, utilize my Spanish, and then they'll text me back in English because they want to practice their English. And that's super common in a lot of my interactions that I have with friends and such that speak Spanish. So
I think it's probably true with anything that you're looking to do or accomplish. Once you set a goal or set your mind to it, if you start to put it out there, the universe responds in an interesting way. Like during the pandemic, my daughters didn't have that in-class immersion time with their native Chinese speakers. So my younger daughter was really struggling to get her foothold in, and coupled with the complications of online learning, et cetera. But I was snowboarding up in Park City, and I was on a lift, and I got on a lift, and there was a Chinese guy sitting next to me. So we became friends up at the top of the lift. And then at the end of the day, I got his contact info, and he works at the hospital or doing research, some research up at the U. And he was able to tap into his network of native Chinese speakers living here in Utah to help track down some options for tutors for my daughters. So, but I was able to naturally have that because I knew enough Chinese. He sits down next to me to have some basic conversation in Chinese, which is fun to practice. And then that led to that connection to track down a tutor.
Awesome. We have two more questions. The first is, many students have a difficult time expressing the skills they gained through study abroad on a resume. Jordan, when you were first applying to jobs, how did you use your study abroad experience in your resume and interviews?
So I mentioned that I graduated faster than I expected that I would have. I thought I needed another full year, but I was able to align up enough and get enough approvals to get that wrapped up in a total of 4 years. It was only 3 years at Utah State, but I didn't do an extensive job search. In Japan, it's like by their junior year, the companies all come on campus and they've got a job locked in before they even start their senior year. But for me, I only really did 2 job interviews. I took the one with Toyota, but both of them were using Japanese. One was with IAC Travel based out of Los Angeles. So I went down there my senior year on spring break and interviewed in person with them in Japanese. And that was it was almost 100% appropriate for my study abroad time, right? Both the cultural travel that I did in Japan and East Asia, but also the coursework study, the language study, et cetera, and being somewhat familiar with other related language was also helpful because it wasn't exclusively Japanese tourists that they were facilitating. There's a little bit of other customers. But then my other one was with Toyota, right? And that's what they were looking for, someone that could communicate with the teams in China. So for those first 2 jobs, that was critical. I'm trying to think now, if I were to go and apply for a new job, what the study abroad would translate to. I don't know. I think it's probably was the most formative or most critical piece of my university experience. So be it a study abroad or an internship, or if possible, an international internship, I would recommend everybody pursue that if you haven't already. And if I were to found a university myself, I would make that mandatory, right? Hopefully that's helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For our last question, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your undergrad self?
This is fresh for Srinidi. Does anything come top of mind? You want to start?
Yeah, oh, wow. I feel like I need more experience before I can tell my undergrad self what I needed to know. Definitely one thing is, just taking the opportunities that come your way, and don't stress so much about where exactly you're going to end up, but just seeking out opportunities and looking for something that feels right, feels like it's a good fit. Because I was so stressed my senior year of like, what is it that I'm going to do? And in the long run, there was lots and lots of applications that I submitted that didn't end up being the right fit, and it was what I thought that I wanted to do. And then this opportunity came knocking at my door, and I jumped on it, and it happened to be the very best thing for me. So just take that opportunity.
Yeah, my reaction might be a little bit different tomorrow or the next day, but what sticks out to me today is probably one. I wish I would have done some form of an internship, and I actually started to pursue one with a company based there in Logan that did I can't remember what it was called, but I went to Australia to play football right out of high school. They organize a tournament down there. Well, maybe it was IAC Trail, I can't remember. But anyway, it was sort of after I graduated, I was looking to do an internship, but I wish I would have pursued that sooner. But or started some form of a business on my own, as opposed to just trying to get my income working construction up there. As fun as that was to go to the dump in Cache Valley and find nice treasures there. But yeah, probably start a business, and I probably actually would have started a band earlier. We never really started a formal band. We did the concert series monthly, but I think establishing it's such a rich experience to interact and meet with people and to create things with them, with a lot of support, and there's not a lot of risk associated with it. You're able to live, at least during undergrad, and I was able to live off very little, right? You sharing a house with roommates, or lower cost of rent, and your expenses aren't as high. Hopefully you don't have a high mortgage or anything at that stage. So I think just experimenting with things in general, creating bands, starting a business, going and doing an internship, and not just fixating so much on here's the coursework that I've got to get done and just trying to bust that out.
Well, awesome. Thank you guys. I did want to mention a little bit just some of the stuff that went through the chat, especially Srinidi, you had mentioned participating in the SEED program. And for anyone else listening, the SEED program, awesome opportunity. Even though it's hosted by the Huntsman School of Business, it's open up to all USU students. So if anyone listening is interested in that, it's a great opportunity to get some international experience and some work experience at the same time. And so thank you guys both. Definitely learned a lot, and thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, a lot of fun.
I would echo
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, I would echo that. Sorry to cut you off, Srinidi. I just think you guys had such great advice to share with our students, both practical and personal. And I love when students feel like they can walk away from these discussions with actionable items, but also feel like they made a connection with you as alumni. So thank you for taking the time today to share some of your story with us. And thank you, Joe, for mentioning that about the SEED program. And I, of course, as someone who sits in CHaSS, will remind everyone that language minors do not take up very much of your time. So if you're not currently a language minor, or you're interested in shifting your BS to a BA, it's definitely worth exploring. And as someone who also was a language major in college, I definitely recommend that everyone consider that. I'm going to conclude today by sharing with everyone just some information about our next event. Hopefully you can see that we are going to be hosting, hopefully we're finalizing the details of this, but on November 12th, we hope to have Logan City Police Officer Andrew Solberg joining us for our next installment of this series. So for those of you interested in pursuing a career in law enforcement or studying criminal justice, we hope you will come back on November 12th at the same time and same place. And of course, we do thank you for attending today. And if you are interested in connecting with Srinidi or Jordan, or have questions for us, here's how you can get in touch with me or with Joe. And we hope that, again, you will tell your friends about this series and come back to hear more from us. And again, to Jordan and Srinidi, we so appreciate your time today, and hope that you will continue to enjoy the love of learning a language and sharing your experiences. And again, we're just so appreciative that you are willing to share those experiences with people today.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, folks. And with that, I will conclude today's presentation and today's recording, and wish everyone a wonderful afternoon.